wanted to show him as someone that is kind of at a nexus of a lot of things. He's someone that's becoming an adult. He's someone who has some, like, older adult friends, like Jody, who's the man driving the car. He's the older cousin. He's the cool guy that all the younger people want to be like. Mm-hmm. And so Mose is getting a lot of input as to how he should be as a man from a lot of people and a lot of sources. And you see him watching TikTok and watching social media that's giving a lot of advice on how to do that too. And so I wanted to show that the complexities of a relationship are kind of being influenced in a lot of ways by all these other inputs. How to be a man, how to kind of interact with women, how to go after what you think you want because you are a developing adult and you want connection, you want a relationship. But how is that connection changed when all these other inputs are hitting you? And I wanted to make it complicated for a reason. I don't want to kind of say, oh, he's a villain or oh, he's the hero. I wanted to show that he's something in between. He makes his own choices, but those choices are happening within an environment. And so that's what I want to say about masculinity. I want to say that it's not just choices, it's the air we breathe in a lot of ways, and that's why it needs to change as an ecosystem in some ways.
Wow. Can we just clap on that response? I love what you just said about we live, just like when we think about how anti-blackness is steeped in our culture, right? So is misogyny, so is toxic masculinity. And so to kind of remind us, we are born into these systems we didn't create, right? And we work to dismantle them, but we still have to exist in them as that work is happening. Yeah. And so everything is a choice. Yes. So within that knowledge, you're still making choices to either perpetuate that or to try not to. Yeah. I love that.
And honestly, I wanted to show that there are several lines along the kind of the course of the night in which Mose could have said something about the fact that he'd already seen the picture. He already knew what she was talking about. And I wanted the audience to kind of walk through those steps with Mose. It's like, oh, should I tell her now? Should I tell her at all? What should I do here? And hopefully that comes through. It's always tough when you're editing a film and kind of saying what little moment, what little second here is going to be the one that helps sell that moment. So hopefully I sold enough of them to kind of put the audience in that headspace. So.
Yeah, I would say so. And then I was curious, how did you, because I know these are your characters, these are your babies, I'm a filmmaker too. Mm-hmm. And so I'm wondering though, what is your opinion? Not to judge your characters, sure, but what is your opinion of how Shan kind of gets her revenge?
This is the question that everyone asks me. People who read the screenplay, people who see the film. I fully understand where Shan is coming from. I fully understand why she reacts the way that she did. I don't want to give a value judgment on whether I think it was good or bad, but I do think, considering, again, we're talking about inputs, considering all the inputs that she got that night, she is throwing a party because she wants to be able to show that she's not cowed by the fact that this picture of her is probably spreading around the school. It's probably spreading into her social circles. So she wants to show that she's not afraid. And then she goes into a moment of vulnerability, going into the room with Mose, who's supposed to be her friend, and then Mose arguably betrays her, And so he wants something out of this relationship. And I purposefully wanted to show a moment where it seems like maybe something will happen, something genuine, something real will happen between them. But I think that, to me, it falls like dominoes for all of Shan's decisions, including her physically attacking Mose, because it's the last person that's supposed to be on her team is not. So I have nothing but love for Shan, and I fully understand her actions. Fully.
I loved it personally.
Yeah.
And that point you just made, I mean, for me, I don't know about everybody else, but I thought that went in such a different direction. I literally thought they were about to have this really tender moment, and he's been crushing on her, liked her all this time, and then she's vulnerable, and that flip of gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah.
I loved it. I loved
I'm
it.
so glad. I'm so glad. And I wanted to show that the reason potentially that it flipped is because of what happens right before it, where he encounters her ex-boyfriend. And I want to keep it a little murky, but that's another input for him because I think he feels kind of pumped up. He feels like I just beat this guy who was challenging me for Shan, this person who I didn't know that maybe I like, maybe I'm in love with, I'm not really sure, but I won that argument. And you could tell his demeanor changes after that.
Oh yeah, he felt like the man.
Yeah, yeah, but even in the way that he deals with Shan, like I mean, he's talking to her in a very tender way before, and then all of a sudden he's starting to judge her. I would say, like kind of saying, "Oh, you like guys like this. It's kind of boring." And all. He's trying to really elevate himself to a place where he thinks he can pursue her the way he now wants to. At least that's again the way when you write these things. That's kind of how you want them to come off. But hopefully, it came off that way. So.
It definitely did, and I interpreted it as him also kind of like code switching in a way to be like, because he's not a macho guy.
No.
Like you can tell that all throughout the film, and
Right.
then after that encounter,
Yeah.
it's like he puts again, a product of toxic masculinity. He's like, yeah, this is the kind of guy she likes, so let me go in like that.
Yeah, and honestly, if we're going into just process stuff, a little inside baseball here is that when it came time to really edit the scene where he comes back into the room, I had the VFX person put a very subtle glow behind Moses' eyes when he comes back in. It's a little something you blink if you miss it, but I did it because I wanted to show that something has shifted inside of him.
Ooh.
If you have a chance to go back and watch, hopefully you do, keep an eye out for that because I wanted to show that there's a shift. And so there is something there just to align with what you said. That's a moment. That's a crossing the Rubicon kind of moment for him. So,
Do you think, my last question before we open up, because I'm sure y'all have questions too. Which I would love to go back and watch that now. Do you think does Shan feel that shift in him too, or is she just pissed generally?
very interesting question. Mostly because I think I wanted Shan, because it's such an interior film to Mose on purpose, I wanted Shan's read on it to be a little nebulous. But in my head, I think that Shan had a pretty good idea of how she wanted to confront Mose, but she wanted to have one final litmus test. She wanted to see when he came back in because it's like if you have insider knowledge. She saw the picture. She saw that it was on his phone.
But she doesn't hear that conversation at all between
She doesn't
them.
hear it. No,
Okay.
She doesn't hear it. But she does see the fact that the photo's on his phone. So she knows that everything up to that point was more of like a lie of omission, I guess. He wasn't saying that he already knew. So I wanted it to play out so that she was asking him questions to probe, I guess, his knowledge and how he wanted to react with her knowing that he had the photo. Sorry, that sounded very confusing, but essentially I wanted it to be something where she was giving him one final test, let's say, before she saw how he wanted to proceed with the night.
Now, she saw the pictures while he was out there.
Yes.
So so that like boost and her finding out that he knew all happened at the same time.
All the same time.
That is brilliant. I love it.
Okay.
Let's give it up for William. Winston, right?
William
Winston.
Yeah. William Winston, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so let's open it up to the audience. Anyone have questions for William and his beautiful film, Morning Glory?
Yes.
Great job, man.
Thank you.
No, I'm good. Me, I was thinking different.
Okay.
You know,
Please share.
I thought that he had posted the picture while
Interesting.
you know, that's what caught them, but maybe it was back then.
Mm-hmm.
She like, see them take but a few minutes. It off like, he hadn't seen them.
Mm-hmm.
That's the vibe I got.
Interesting.
You know,
Okay. You have it.
my first looking at, because I was trying to figure out, how you trying to read what's going on.
Sure.
So
Okay.
that's why she got
That's a very interesting read, and mostly because I wanted it to be very, very murky as to who posted the picture. As you can see, when Mose, the lead character, confronts Ryan, Ryan actually looks a little confused because I want it to be at least apparent that he didn't send it. What I wanted to show was that these things kind of take on a life of their own. He had the picture, but he didn't kind of disseminate it around the school. There's a moment where we see his friend. I wanted to like maybe have a suggestion that his friend got a hold of it and spread it around the school, but I didn't want to make it obvious. I wanted to kind of be like, no, these things they take on a life of their own, which is why they're so dangerous actually. But that's an interesting read, mostly because I think that part of Shan's revenge is to show Mose what it feels like. What it feels like to have your agency taken away. What it feels like to think you're in an intimate moment, and then someone has a picture of you that you didn't ask them to take. And so I like that read. That's not the way that I envision it, but I respect that read. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Oh, okay.
Oh, go ahead.
No, sorry, that was my fault.
Okay. Keep going.
Thank you. Mm. Mhm. 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 Yes. Good. Mhm. 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 Interesting. Sure. I think when it comes to the who knew at what point and kind of how that affected the narrative, I wanted it to be a bit of like, having three cards and only showing two of them for almost everyone involved. But the way that I wanted it to feel in terms of the betrayal was that the piece of information that's really being held off is Mose already having the picture on his phone. Shan tells him that something happened, or at least suggests that something happened when he kind of does the frame with his hands. She's like, that's not weird, right? And that's when he responds, oh, it's not weird, everything's fine, under the assumption that he's saying that her doing that in the bedroom, that's fine. It's not something that she should be worried about. What she doesn't know is that he already has the real picture on his phone. So that is, to me, the betrayal. The betrayal is already having the evidence, and you had me kind of like pouring my heart. This is Shan. You had me pouring my heart out. You had me, kind of waiting on tenterhooks, trying to figure out how I should go about dealing with the school, dealing with everyone else. But you already knew, and so that to me is the betrayal. It's a betrayal of intimacy because he's supposed to be her closest friend. She had walls up around everything until they got in that room, and she was like pouring out her heart and soul, and he already knew. So that's the betrayal that I wanted to get across. I also like your read on it too. I did want to keep it nebulous, but if we're talking about just the betrayal that she feels, I think it rests in that particular moment.
So would you say it's kind of like, as I was hearing you talk, like if I don't know, like if your best friend knew your partner was cheating on you and didn't tell you,
Yeah.
and then you're sitting there like pouring your heart out about it, would
Yeah.
you say like that? And then you're like, you knew the whole time?
You knew the whole time. And more than that, I mean, if we're kind of like following that line of thinking, more than that, like, but then you set up this amazing trip for us. You did something really, really, really intimate for us, already knowing the truth of it. And to me, that hurts more because it's not like you found out when I was telling you. You found out like months or days ago, and you didn't say anything. You had all this context and you didn't share it. So I not only feel hurt by the situation, but I feel hurt because you kind of made me a fool a little bit, and you're supposed to be the person who has my back no matter what. So that's the betrayal. It's subtler, but it also cuts deeper. At least that's the way I intended it. So
Yeah, I kind of want to piggyback off of what the last commenter said, and I really enjoyed your film because it's multifaceted in so many ways, some of which you've explained already, but I kind of want to, what I really love about it is the different ways, and that's the sign of a great film, the different ways you could really like look at everything that occurred because, you know, on the first thought of it was thinking about it from, you know, the adult point of view, but then also being a young, you know, teenager at some point, thinking about it from that point of view, like the betrayal is very real. I'm not dismissing what you said, but it's also like, how do you, as a 17 whatever year old, really tell someone, your best friend or whoever, like really be able to like bridge that? You know, that's extremely difficult. It's difficult as a 20-year-old, or maybe today, maybe even as a 30-year-old, right? So like to think from this teenage mind and put hormones on top of that, right? But just like this, I want to say immature mind too. Like I said, not dismissing the betrayal, it's very real. But thinking about it from that point of view also, it's just like, it's really interesting to see how you allow the characters to play it out and everything. So I just want to congratulate you on really creating like this really beautifully way of just like portraying how all these characters' points of view in a really beautiful and short amount of time. This is really great job on that, man. Seriously.
thank you so much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
Any more questions on this side? Got one right over here. Okay.
Thank you. Love the film, first. I want to
Thank
say
you.
that. I think you may have answered my question, but I'm going to ask just to make sure. In the film, towards the end, there was a young man in a window. Who was he, and what was the significance of having them in your film?
Sure. That is actually a person who's a neighbor of Shan. So it's this person that just kind of wants to watch the party, maybe is a little younger than the group that's going into the party. But I wanted to show at least one character who has the aspirations to join that set, to be a teenager, a level removed from Mose. So Mose is going to the party, he doesn't know what's gonna happen. Then they have a younger generation who also wants to go to that party, but they're too young, who also wants to be a part of that vision of the cool teenager, you know, engaging in whatever, too young. And I also wanted him to be the person that looks at Shan in that way at the end of the film, showing that it kind of goes to the next generation. It keeps falling back. These things keep perpetuating themselves. Because she's out there, she's crying her heart out because of this thing that happened, and he's looking at her in this really lascivious way. And I wanted to show that moment, have it punctuate her story, because I wanted her to both be really agentive and kind of turn away and not give him that, but I also wanted to show how quickly you can kind of lust after someone without knowing their whole situation, and just kind of show how the cycle keeps repeating. So
There's one over here.
Hi, I am so excited to be here with my daughter for her to see that. So we are on a school field trip. She is an aspiring actress, and so she's been working in that world. And we're homeschooling this year, so this is a field trip. It's great. But for her as a teenager to see that film, it was great because this is happening in real time in her life. Not to her, praise the Lord. But it, very likely potentially to people around her because they're making choices. Everybody makes a choice. But I've noticed a lot in film that for these teenage roles, a lot of times teenagers aren't used. And even like in her, entering this place, she is an age, she looks a different age. But in that teenage space, the roles for them, even though characters for them exist, roles for them do not. And you notice that they're 20-year-olds and sometimes 30-year-olds playing teenagers. This story is so poignant for that generation, but could you ever trust a person from that generation to tell this type of story?
That's a great question. Just to kind of go and process a little bit more. So I actually, my producer and I, my producer Latanya, who's not here, she and I had to do casting during the pandemic, so we did a lot of Zoom casting. We found 2 actors that looked like they could be teenagers. They were fantastic, Jordan and Michaela. But then we really wanted to populate the film with people who were teenagers. So a lot of the background actors were actually teenagers. My brother-in-law is a high school teacher, and so we reached out to him to see if there were any people, and we got quite a few actual teenagers. To answer your question about whether or if teenagers can be trusted to tell their own tales, I completely they can be. Yes, they definitely can be. I think for what we were trying to achieve with the film and in the space that we had, we really wanted to make sure that we had people who had training, who actually had the kind of some of the credits to be able to sell the story in a certain way. But I also am a huge fan of street casting. I think that, sometimes you find someone who has the charisma and has just the gravitas to be able to tell a story, and they might be teenagers. So yes, I think that definitely teenagers can tell those stories. It's all a matter of a lot of other background decisions that are happening in pre-production. Who you can really reach out to at the time you're casting the film. They have certain different websites and casting directors whose specialty is really teenagers, and so there are people looking for those talents. But yeah, our shook out the way it did. So.
I would also like to add, this could be some really helpful context for you, because I heard, in your question, kind of like the frustration around, why can't people that age play those roles? A big, huge part of it is the fact that they're a minor. Yeah. And it's like, honestly, them being a minor would probably be one of the biggest, because when you work with minors, you have to have, it's a very strict set of rules that adults don't have to abide by. You must have a tutor on set at all times. They can only work a certain amount of hours. I used to work in production. It's very, very hard to work with children. And then when we're talking about things that involve sex or mature themes, there's so many stipulations honestly, to protect them, make sure they're not exploited. And adults need that too, but it is a bit harder and more difficult. And if you want to do nudity, you can't do that with a child. It's a lot that goes into it. So it's not, I don't want you to think it's a matter of they don't want them to tell their own stories. It really is legalities.
Yeah, that's a huge piece of it as well. And I think that was something, especially with the high school students that I was talking about. We had to get a lot of waivers, a lot of disclaimers. We had to meet with a few of the parents. Again, for very good reasons, but that might be a big impediment for a lot of people who kind of just want to get their kids into production. So it's just a huge consideration that can really slow down production on, especially a short film, where you kind of have a very compressed time frame to shoot things. But it's not an impossibility. It's just more you have to be strategic around how you get your child into whatever the production is, and just be ready for a lot of hoops to jump through, again, which are very good hoops to jump through. So,
So we have time for one more question. I saw this hand shoot up in the back first.
well, thank you very much for that vote of confidence. It's tough, especially when you're making a lot of short films, to generate things like production funds. We're always looking for things like the incidentals, like catering. Supporting me, you can follow me on social media. I have a couple business cards I'd be very happy to share with everyone. But my social media handle is What You Will, so WHATUWILL. So you can find me on social media on any of the social media at that handle. But generally, yeah, just hopefully, yeah, keep an eye out for my name. I'm probably going to be going into production on another short film later on this year, so just stay tuned. Yeah, and honestly, supporting me means just continuing to support Black film any way that you can. because I'm part of that community. So just keep on supporting it and just realize that there are a lot of stories to be told, and we're all just trying to tell them as best we can. So that's the best way to do it.
And real quick, just to end us, can you tell us like where you're based?
Sure.
How long you've been making films? Just a little background.
Absolutely. So I'm actually based in New York, just outside of New York City. But I was raised in Maryland, but I was born not too far from here in Charlotte. So it is a bit of a homecoming in a literal sense. But I think that, what's the second part of your question? I'm sorry.
I said where you're based
Yes.
and like how long you've been a filmmaker.
Yes. So I've been I went to film school eons ago at this point, but I was working in production, and then I went to grad school, so I was an academic for a while. But I'm back in production, and I've been doing production-related things since 2015. So I actually worked as a lead camera tech, doing a lot of, like, essentially servicing camera equipment for music videos, short films, feature films in New York City for a while. Now I'm a copywriter at an agency, so it allows me to work on different types of copy, but I've been screenwriting since around that time, so like 2015 or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, William.
Thank you.
Let's give it up. This was a wonderful block, and your film was a great opener. And thank you for being in conversation with me.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.